The history of Iraq since the 7th century CE is covered in this discussion. See Mesopotamia for the preceding historical period. Iraq between 600 and 1055. Iraq had been a province of the Persian Sasanian Empire for 3 centuries by the year 600. The Sasanian monarchy's primary resource base was the intense irrigated agriculture of the lower Tigris and Euphrates rivers and their tributaries, including the Dile and Karen. It was likely the most populous and prosperous region in the Middle East. The Sasanian Empire had been divided into 4 quarters by Khosrow I in the middle of the 6th century. The western quarter, known as Kvarvaran, contained the majority of modern-day Iraq. But the word Iraq was not in use at the time. For the region in the center and south of the current republic, the name Iraq is frequently employed in medieval Arabic texts as a geographic phrase rather than a political one, meaning no specific limits, and refers to the island between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, i.e., Mesopotamia, was the name given to the region of modern-day Iraq north of Tikrit in Muslim times. Al-Jazra, which translates to the island and refers to the island between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, i.e., Mesopotamia, was the name given to the region of modern-day Iraq north of Tikrit in Muslim times. The Arabian Desert, which was to the south and west, was populated primarily by Arab tribes, but they sporadically recognized the Sasanian rulers as their superiors. The Lakhmid rulers of Al-Ara, who were Arabs themselves, but governed a settled buffer state, had been tasked with protecting the desert frontier until 602. Khosrow II, Parvs, abruptly dismantled the Lakhmid Empire that year. The locals came from a variety of backgrounds. Although there was an aristocratic and powerful Persian elite class, the majority of people were Aramaic-speaking farmers. Many Arabs, mostly pastoralists near the western edges of the settled regions. But some were also urban dwellers, especially in Al-Ara, lived in the area. Additionally, there were many Greeks, most of whom were prisoners taken during the multiple Sasanian incursions into Byzantine Syria, as well as Kurds who resided near the foothills of the Zagros Mountains. Religious diversity paralleled ethnic diversity. Zoroastrianism, the state religion of the Sasanians, was primarily practiced by the Persian aristocracy. Most of the population was undoubtedly Christian, particularly in the north of the nation. Doctrinal differences led to a clear division between them into Miaphysites, affiliated with the Jacobite Church of Syria, and Nestorians, affiliated with the Church of the East. Because of their hostility to the Roman Empire's Christians, who viewed the Nestorians as heretics, and because they were the most prevalent, the Sasanian kings allowed the Nestorians. Although the Miaphysites were periodically punished and treated with greater mistrust, both factions were able to establish an ecclesiastical structure, and the Nestorians had a significant intellectual center at Nisibis. At that point, invasion endangered this multiracial society's stability and prosperity in the early 7th century. The last significant Persian invasion of the Byzantine Empire began in 602 under Khosrow II. He initially had amazing success, causing the fall of Syria and Egypt as well as a threat to Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Later, however, the tide started to shift, and in 627 to 628 the Byzantines, led by the Emperor Heraclius, invaded Iraq and took Ctesiphon as their capital. The attackers left, but Khosrow was tarnished, removed, and put to death. Thereafter, there was a period of internal strife among the generals and royal family, which left the nation without a clear leader. Irrigation systems had been harmed by the upheaval, and it was possibly at this time that significant portions of Arab invasion and the beginning of Islam. The Battle of the Bridge, when the Arabs were routed, appears to have been the first encounter between local Bedouin tribes and Sasanian forces in 634. The Persians defeated a troop of about 5,000 Muslims led by Abd al-Abaid Thaqaf there. At the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah in 637, a considerably bigger Muslim force led by Sa'd ibn Abi Waqt routed the main Persian army and then proceeded to seize Ctesiphon. The Muslims had nearly completely conquered Iraq by the end of the following year, 638, and Yazdijerd III, the last Sasanian ruler, had escaped to Iran. He was assassinated there in 651. Arabs from eastern Arabia and Oman immigrated in large numbers after the Muslim conquest. Instead of dispersing and settling all across the nation, these newcomers founded two new garrison cities at Kufa, close to Old Babylon, and at Basra in the south. The idea was that the Muslims would be a distinct group of warriors and their families who lived off the taxes paid by the local populace. The most significant city and home to a Muslim governor and army in the north of the kingdom started to form as Mosul. Most locals were let to retain their properties and their religion, with the exception of the Persian nobility and Zoroastrian priests, whose property was seized. Now, Iraq was a province of the Muslim Caliphate, which extended from Sindh, now southern Pakistan, in the east to North Africa and then Spain in the west. The Caliphate's initial capital was Medina, but after the third caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, was assassinated in 656, his successor, Al, the Prophet Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, established himself in Iraq. Al, however, was assassinated in Kufa in 661, and the rival Umayyad family in Syria took control of the caliphate. Iraq lost its independence and became a province under another country, despite being the richest and having the most Muslims. This circumstance led to ongoing, multifaceted discontent with Umayyad rule. The Abbasid Caliphate in 747, the Maghrib Muslim hoisted black banners in support of the Abbasids, a branch of the Prophet's family that was distantly related to Al and his descendants. This was the turning point in the opposition to the Umayyads. The armies from the east arrived in Iraq in 749, where they were welcomed by a sizable portion of the populace. The first Abbasid caliph, Abu al-Abbas, al-Saf, was declared in the mosque at Kufa in 749. The Abbasids originally originated from their remote estate at Umamah in southern Jordan. Iraq's physical characteristics. Plains of alluvium. House in Iraq's Shat al-Arab. The lower Mesopotamian plains reach the Persian Gulf at a distance of around 375 miles, 600 kilometers, from Balad on the Tigris and Al-Ramd on the Euphrates. They are characterized by low elevation, below 300 feet, 100 meters, and inadequate natural drainage, covering more than 51,000 square miles, 132,000 square kilometers, or nearly one-third of the country's total territory.
There are enormous marshlands, some of which dry up in the summer to become salty wastelands, and other sections are vulnerable to severe seasonal floods. There are still a few populated wetlands close to Al-Qurna where the Tigris and Euphrates meet to form the Shat al-Arab.